So honestly, not as bad as it could have been, but all these little things, oh, and another drone goes down, all these little things are just killing Jaedong right now. He's just so far behind economy-wise.
Yeah, he is pretty behind in economy. I don't know if I'd count Jaedong out at this point, though, because he seems like, I mean, one thing I noticed about, I would have counted him out if he hadn't done this in that first attack, is while his Hydralisks were chasing, a radiant goes off. Whoa, not as nice of a separation as I thought, actually. But as those Hydralisks were chasing around those vultures, what we saw pop, as soon as the last vulture died, we saw 6 drones pop out of his hatcheries in his main, and he basically replaced all the drones that he lost. So it wasn't really that tragic because Jaedong was able to catch back up. He was already catching back up by the time he was dispatching the vultures in the first place. But you're right, they did send him back a little bit, but Jaedong is definitely a guy that can come back from a disadvantage like that. But he needs to come back in here and do some damage to Fantasy now, and he hasn't really done that. And that's the thing here is, Fantasy's been able to get a bunch of barracks up. Yeah, as Steve's pointing out to me, he's switching back into a lot of medic marines, and he's probably going to go with tanks as well. Really kind of an interesting switch up here. I think he might have done that after he saw those Mutalisks. But there's the lurkers as well. Jaedong playing almost like a ZVP here, switching tech back and forth, just going crazy. When Fantasy expected Hydras, he went Mutas and caught him with just a few Marines and more tanks. And now he's getting a lot of mech Marines, and he's going to have the lurkers out. He's got the science vessels, though, but it looks like Jaedong might just be thinking about containing him. If he can pick off the vessels, well, no, he's got 2 vessels, so he's not going to be able to do a stop lurker trick or anything like that. But he does have the group of mutas and the Scourge there, so he might be able to pick off the vessels and keep Fantasy back a little bit longer. So Fantasy with a good mixed army here, actually, and Jaedong with a good mixed army as well. Just looking at the supply counts here, they're pretty much even in supply as well, so it could really go either way at this point.
Yeah, it really can. I'm actually surprised we haven't seen like a lurker drop or something from Jaedong. When he saw him get the fast overlords right away, I assumed there's going to be some sort of drop play. I think something like that, if he can squeeze it by Fantasy's incredible defense at his base, would be really huge. But we see a lot. I mean, Jaedong is macroing like Jaedong, which is he's getting a lot of units. He may even go for an expansion here in a moment, and in which case Fantasy is going to have to try to go for an expansion. And I think Fantasy has a strong push coming up here. I think this is going to be, it's a good idea to try to take that dominance and to not get stuck in your base. But look how many units! Jaedong with a fleet of Mutalisks, with the flank attack coming up here. And there's not enough Marines to take out all of those Mutalisks, and there's no Goliaths out for Fantasy. Fantasy has a lot of tanks. These tanks are going to go down now. He can possibly, you notice how Jaedong is spreading out his Mutalisks, so that way Fantasy can't use their Irradiate effectively against them. And this attack is about to go down. It's going to be a sandwich, a Marine sandwich, Fantasy, and a Subway sandwich here. It's not happening quite yet, but I think Jaedong's hesitating.
Jaedong's delaying for Swarm right now. He's trying to delay for Swarm.
You're right.
And I think he thinks he's close enough to Swarm that he can fall back and protect that third. I think that's why he was moving his lurkers up there. There's the Defiler's out now. There's the Swarm goes down. That is what it took, and now he's going to go in with a pincher attack with the Swarm on the front. Marines going after the Zergs, after the Swarm. Mutalisks coming in, lurkers from both sides underneath the Swarm. I think he may hold, though.
What?
Wow, the tanks hold, and not enough lurkers, not enough Zerglings, just not enough units in general. Wow.
Man.
That was crazy. I did not think he would hold. I think...
and now
he's suiciding.
That could be...
Man.
Our hands are in our foreheads.
That could be almost game right there, losing all those Mutalisks. Jaedong's army is now nothing less. Good swarms there to get on those tanks. If he can take a lot of these tanks, but I don't think he's going to be able to do it. The critical thing is Fantasy has kept his whole army alive, whereas Jaedong has pretty much lost all of his. And what happened in that last battle was he put a couple initial swarms to get up to that ridge to where those tanks were, but he didn't have any swarms on top of the tanks. So once he got to the tanks, there were science vessels, there was Marines, and it just wiped Jaedong's army out. So Jaedong attempted to do a flank attack, but his swarms were just a little poorly positioned. He just didn't, or maybe just didn't have enough energy left to cast those swarms. Now we're seeing a couple science vessels going out, so that's going to be good for Jaedong. It looks like Jaedong was going to lose his 4th hatch. He's down to a 3rd hatchery, and Fantasy is still on 2. One thing I was going to say that is an advantage for Jaedong is that even though, as we mentioned, Jaedong was a little economically behind, for a Zerg to switch tech, it's just so much more economic than a Terran. I mean, when Jaedong switched tech, he switched to Lurker, so he got to change all of his Hydras into Lurkers, so it's just very economic, and it looks like a lot of Radiance going down to actually kill Scourge. That's interesting, but it looks like Fantasy's just really confident with this huge force. What I was going to say is it takes a lot of gas and, you know, everything to switch back to Medic Marines. Now you got he threw down 2 engineering bays. He's going to have to, you know, upgrade all those upgrades now, build a bunch of barracks, switch back to Medic Marines. So economy-wise, it's pretty much even out because I feel like Jaedong's tech switch was just a lot more economical for him. And now we're seeing it looks like
40 ahead.
Who is that?
Fantasy's about 40 ahead of Jaedong.
ahead, so that's not where you want to be as a Zerg player. But better swarms this time, and a couple Science Vessels going down. I think actually all these tanks might go down. No, it looks like there are enough Medic Marines there to hold off that attack. But really, you got to feel like, I mean, I don't know why Fantasy hasn't planned down expansion. He's been too busy. But you got to feel like that Jaedong is a little bit on the back foot now. It looks like Jaedong has put a hatchery up in the top left, though, too. So it's really hard to tell. Jaedong is really holding his own here, really fighting. It looks like a couple tanks getting stranded out here by themselves. No Medic Marines, a lot of tanks going down. Good surround by the Zerglings, and even the Science Vessels might be going down. That fan's impressed. I'm impressed. All those units going down. So actually, Jaedong really redeeming himself here. And it looks like, though, the Fantasy has a dropship. He's got probably a Medics and Firebats in there, or it looks like just a Medic Marine group. That's going to take down that hatchery. So again, this is what I was talking about with this map being so hard to expand on if you're a Zerg, because you just can't hold anything, and it's just too far away to even reinforce. If the Zerg could maybe get a Nidus Canal, that would help tremendously, but he didn't even get the creep up to get to that point.
Yeah, that's critical. If Jaedong can get a hatchery down and get the creep there, he will immediately have a Nidus Canal, and then all he needs is like a handful of Zerglings, and a nice drop in the back. He's moved the drop over to the back. He's got crack upgraded grid of Zerglings to try and dispatch this, but it looks like he's going to lose a couple drones. He may lose his spotting pool.
Oh my gosh!
Or some other tech here. I think it'd probably be better to go after the Evil Dilation Chambers, actually, at this point. Jaedong counterattacking in the north, trying to take out that base. It looks like he is going to clean up the power of the Cracklings, overcoming those few Marines, and now some Hydras coming in. This is getting nuts, and I think basically the key here for Fantasy in the long term is to take out the hatcheries before the creep comes in, because all he's going to need is a few Zerglings, a Lurker, and a Defiler. He can pop them through the Nidus Canal and protect any base, and meanwhile do counterattacks of his own. And look at this, he may even save that gas mine. Oh, Fantasy not targeting it.
Oh, that's a
looks
shame.
like he's going to lose it. Actually, whoa, microing them a lot better than I expected. He's going to pull those Marines back, but that attack is effectively neutralized. Anyway, but basically, Fantasy's going to be back on 3 bases in a minute, and Jaedong is just remaining at 3 bases. So, oh man, look at that. Those 2 medics have more energy than he anticipated.
Wow.
Healing the crap out. And look, he's going to drop more or pick them up. Yeah, he's going to drop more, come back in here, and really put pressure on Jaedong in more than one location here. Really keep him from expanding. So this is getting nuts. Oh, there's the dropship, but I think it's too late. Those Marines are really going to clean up some tech here. This is not looking good for Jaedong.
Oh, see, I think the problem is, if Jaedong was able to get just one expansion, I think he could have ran away with this game. Because Fantasy, it wasn't microing. There was a point there when Fantasy was not microing. Huge attack going on here at the bottom left. That is it. Fantasy taking it. What I was going to say is that I really felt like that there was a point in that game about 5 minutes ago when I felt if Jaedong had gotten one of those expansions, he could have expanded, he could have macroed, and he could have ran away with the game. Because that's what happens in Zerg versus Terran. There's this point where Terran just takes off, and same with Protoss for PvZ as well. But Fantasy, he had Marines at every spawn location. He had mines to show him where Jaedong was going to go and try to make the expansion, and he contained Jaedong to 3 bases that whole game. I am extremely impressed with how Fantasy played.
Well, yeah, and I'm definitely not saying it's just the map or anything, but just the fact that, that definitely hurts that on that map it's so hard for, him to get another expansion. You saw he had his 3rd hatchery in his base. He couldn't get out of that position, and Jaedong with a brilliant drop was able to get a little bit of an edge, Fantasy with the drop was able to get an edge, and Fantasy's just not going to let that edge go. You saw him kind of sloppily, he lost some of the micro battles when it came to little fights, he lost some of those, but in the end, he still had a pretty big advantage, and that carried him to the win.
You have any wrap-ups on that, Multi?
Oh, no, that's, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what happened. I think it may... I mean, I kind of was saying that Jaedong was still in it, but I may have over-minimized the effect of that drop, because it really did kind of put him behind originally. And Fantasy, I was probably underestimating Fantasy as well when I said that Jaedong was kind of still in it, because, he is a programmer and he's very, very good. He's going to keep that advantage and really push it home. I think part of it also was the fact that Jaedong really didn't do anything back to Fantasy. I mean, you know,
Right.
Jaedong, I think, might have still been in it at that point if he'd been able to come back and do some counter damage to Fantasy. But Fantasy somehow, with like 5 Marines, was able to hold off a group of Mutalisks. And it may have been a lack of aggression on Jaedong's part, getting
Right.
scared away by like 3 turrets in the main or something like that. I would have expected to see more out of that, or maybe it's because he was trying to tech the lurkers at the same time and he didn't have the gas to really get more mutas. I don't know, but either way, Fantasy looking really good in this first game, and really kind of using what he knows best. I mean, that's what the Fantasy build is. It's going from it's doing the vulture drop early on, and usually he stays mech with that. But going with the vulture drop and really doing some damage. So we'll see if Jaedong can clean up that early mech thing that Fantasy does a little bit better next time.
All right, we're gonna go on to game 2 here.